Xia Qimiao's childhood dream was to become a renter and have a building lying down to collect rent. After she stumbled into the Eerie survival game, her dream became to live well. She didn't expect the rewards of the dungeon to make her childhood dreams come true, but the problem was that she suddenly had a creepy building. Headless monster. Why don't you retrieve my head and I'll push it against you? Rope trick. Cutting tongue, shui gui. Gulu 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 Xia Qimiao. It's not necessary. Even if she collects rent, she still has to go and rent herself. How can this timid person survive? Helpless, she could only pass the dungeon while searching for tenants. Others were hiding from the monsters, while she trembled and ran with them. Disguised eight-legged monster. Sister, why don't you get up and play with me, Xia Qimiao? Alright, my sister has a rental contract here, starting from 1 year, with a deposit of 1 to 3. Once you sign it, I will accompany you to play. Keywords of the novel. I am working as a landlady in Guelu without pop-ups. I am working as a landlady in Guelu. Download the complete TXT collection, and read the latest chapters on working as a landlady in Guelu. Chapter 1. Task of Temporary Building Owner's Substitution. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Task of Temporary Building Owner's Substitution. In a narrow and gloomy corridor, the walls are mottled and the floors are crisscrossed with cracks, like traces left by the passage of time, filled with a sense of decay. Deep in the corridor, it seems like a black hole, devouring all the incoming light. Vaguely, a slender figure stood in front of the hallway door, which was a slightly frail girl. Open the door and collect the rent. Her voice was extremely cold, spreading through the quiet corridor. However, there was no movement inside the house. Without receiving a response, the girl started knocking on the damp door. Bang! The wooden door made a heavy muffled sound. The hammer that knocked on the wooden door was half a person high, with a very sturdy handle and a wide and thick hammer head, with dark red spots on it. Just looking at it alone made people feel twice as stressed. She remained silent and saw no response from behind the door, so she swung her sledgehammer and let out another bang. When she swung the sledgehammer for the third time, there was finally movement and the wooden door opened. A blue light drifted from the door onto the scale she was holding in her left hand, indicating 1,000, which happened to be the rent for the second floor. However, Xia Qimiao used a hammer to block the door that was about to close, and the 1,000-pound hammer in her hand was like a toy easily swung by her. She noticed a violation, and she remembered that the second rule of the temporary labor code was, there is a strict hierarchical order in this building, and the higher the floor, the higher the level of monsters. Her current title is Building 3 Master. Temporary, you have a deterrent effect on ordinary monsters. Now is the second floor, which should be the place where the lowest level monster resides. If this is the lowest level monster, it should be intimidated by its title from the beginning and not wait for her to knock the door twice before opening. If this is a high-level monster, it should not pay rent so easily. You should know that now is the best time to show off to newcomers. It's too contradictory. The world of dungeons is full of pitfalls, and Xia Qimiao dare not take it lightly, so she spoke up and said, "You have a problem." She could feel the increasing strength of closing the door, but her expression remained unchanged. Regardless of whether it is a problem or not, she is the landlord who collects rent, and the final interpretation is in her hands. If she says there is, there is. Do you really think I don't know anything? Why do you think I came here? This sentence loosened the grip on the hammer. Article 3 of the Temporary Work Regulations. Do not assume that monsters are completely rational, nor do you assume that they are completely irrational. Xia Qimiao took advantage of the heat and said, "You still have a chance now. If." Haha. She sneered coldly, and only then did she remove the hammer when she saw the light floating out again. To be honest, she didn't expect to have any extra gain, it was another 1,000. She turned on the radio hanging from her waist, and the sound echoed throughout the entire building. Finally, when I patrol the building later, I will leave as much rent as I need to pay at the door. If I don't want to give it, I'll see you inside. The first rule of the temporary work rules. Stay on the first floor or in the hallway, unless you have strong enough strength. Do not enter the room of monsters, that is their territory. Her voice was steady, but the warning was strong. After speaking, she carried a hammer up the stairs. It's not that she doesn't like taking the elevator, but it's like a jumping machine, jumping vertically repeatedly between 1.18, but this building looks like it's only 9 floors from the outside. A regular jump machine plays with its heartbeat, it plays with its life. In the stairwell, Xia Qimiao rubbed her face before feeling the coldness in her palms. She wanted to scream, but couldn't, she could only shout in her heart. Ah ah ah. She has been afraid of ghosts since childhood. She never goes into haunted houses, doesn't listen to ghost stories, and doesn't watch ghost movies, but now she has to face ghosts and deal with them to collect rent. She just said she wanted to talk inside the house, it was just a psychological tactic to scare them. She always felt like she was going to the limit. Fortunately, this is a short-term task, and she only needs to endure for 20 hours. Xia Qimiao can be said to have bad luck. She was abandoned in the hospital at birth and later sent to an orphanage. Although she doesn't look bad, she doesn't have many facial expressions on weekdays and looks difficult to get close to, so no one wants to adopt her and can only grow up in the courtyard. She can also be said to be very lucky. When she met a kind-hearted dean who gave her a bite to eat, and when she met a kind-hearted teacher who taught her how to study. She was admitted to college and worked while studying, feeling a bright future ahead. Seeing life getting better, she suddenly became a player in the Eerie game. And this game is called, There Are No Ghosts in This World. Let go of it. Xia Qimiao's face turned numb as she remembered the scene she saw when she was teleported into a dungeon for the first time. That time ended quickly, and 5 people came out in a daze. She didn't accumulate much experience, but successfully unlocked the game forum and gained a lot of effective information. If you die in the game, you will die in reality. As long as you are alive and have enough source power, you can return to reality and recover even if you are cut off. The game forces players to complete 1 dungeon per week. If the source power value reaches 100 million, even if the goal is achieved, players can choose to end the game and return to normal life. The player who has just been selected will enter a low-level beginner dungeon in the first 2 games, with low difficulty. If they don't actively seek death, they won't die. This is Xia Qimiao's second scene. She opened the panel and glanced at the task again. Character panel, name. Xia Qimiao level. G.level rationality. 77 attack value. 6, plus 105, defense value. 5 talent. Cowardly Ghost, your fear will turn into your sharp blade, title. Building 3 Master. Temporary, you have a deterrent effect on ordinary monsters, skill. None status. None props. Hammer, S, foot scale, S, kitchen knife, G, source force value. 50 task panel name. Temporary building owner's shift task level. S.level details. Happy Home is a beautiful, friendly, and warm community, and the purpose of community service is to make every household feel happy and joyful. The owner of Building 3 has been in a bad mood recently. Due to a problem with the rental payment system, the rent for this month has not been fully collected. However, she must participate in the upcoming annual building evaluation competition, and she is exhausted. To solve this problem, the community has issued a temporary recruitment notice for the building owner, stating that you are an employee who has come to apply. Requirement. Survive until the owner of Building 3 returns, countdown. 19, 38, 44 seconds, collect rent for Building 3, progress of 2,000/50,000. Punishment for failure. Permanent loss of a pair of eyes. Success reward. Building 3's favorability increased by 30*1, rated treasure chest. The bright S. level seems to be mocking, who said there will be a novice protection period. Make an effort to make ends meet, there's no way we can survive. Xia Qimiao rubbed her face twice again, lifted her legs and went up to the 3rd floor. The corridor was very quiet, only her footsteps could be heard. She stopped at 301, which was also a wooden door with clear patterns visible. Just before Xia Qimiao had a chance to observe carefully, she saw that the door had opened a gap, and a hairy hand quickly extended and retracted, leaving only a blue light floating in mid-air. She took out the scale, and the prop description also showed up. Prop. S-level foot scale, temporary, description. Able to weigh the source power value of the vast majority of monsters. Comment. You can try putting your eyes on it to see how light it is, from an unknown Xinmu. This light cluster is worth 1,500, just right. The rent for the 2nd floor is 1,000, the rent for the 3rd floor is 1,500, the rent for the 4th floor is 2,000, and so on. At the beginning, the part where the ghost fell on the 2nd floor was worth 1,000, but she asked for an extra 1,000 in case of emergency. She carried a scale in one hand and a sledgehammer in the other, walking from head to toe. Prop. Class S hammer, temporary, description. Can deal real damage to monsters below the king level, but requires an attack power greater than 100 to pick them up. Evaluation. Only real damage is the most real damage, from an unknown owner. These 2 props, like her title, were temporarily distributed by the dungeon. Fortunately, there were these, otherwise she wouldn't have known how she died. The hammer rubbed against the ground, making a dull and toothy sound. As it dragged past, clusters of light appeared at the door one by one. Only rooms with residents have doors, otherwise it's a black hole. Xia Qimiao walked through the 3rd and 4th floors and gained a total of over 20,000 source power points. It went very smoothly, but she didn't dare to let her guard down. Although each door was tightly closed, she could clearly feel herself being peeped at. Those gazes stuck behind her, closely following her. She didn't look back, afraid of exposing her timidity. She straightened her waist and back, just walking forward and upward. Finally, I was shut out at 504. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Why do you only have 2 hands? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Why do you only have 2 hands? The outside of the building is shrouded in white mist. Although the lighting is average, it is enough for Xia Qimiao to see clearly the situation on the corridor. In front of her was an old-fashioned iron door, and the rust on the surface appeared even darker in the dim light. She didn't speak, but knocked on the door with a hammer. She must be tough and not show any fear or timidity. She recalled the image of a landlady she had seen before and must be ruthless. She collects money, and these things are owed. The effect is significant. The door opened with a loud click, and before Xia Qimiao could see it clearly, she heard a burst of laughter, male and female indistinguishable. Why do you only have 2 hands? Hee, you only have 2 hands. She fixed her gaze and saw a humanoid monster. Xia Qimiao didn't want to call him a person because although he looked like a standing person on the other side, upon closer inspection, he could tell that the 2 exposed ears of the other person were 2 slender hands. Fingers are bending and twisting towards her. Your rationality is being violently impacted and is rapidly declining. Talent. Cowardly Ghost is doubling in effectiveness, and your attack value is rapidly increasing. Xia Qimiao's body moved faster than her brain, and the hammer took the lead in smashing the thing's head. She didn't expect the force to be too strong, so she smashed the monster down and half of her body fell out of the door. She saw it flipping on the ground, as if wanting to stand up. Xia Qimiao had no time to think, so she swung her hammer and hit her waist, only hearing a mournful cry. This sound doesn't come from the head she just hit, but from inside the room. She looked inside and realized that the 2 legs she had just stood on were not legs at all, but arms. But this thing also has 2 arms on its upper body. She couldn't even think about why people would grow like this, so she had to keep smashing them. But this time it was empty, and the hands inside grabbed something and dragged the body back. After the source force value floats out, the door needs to be closed. Xia Qimiao acted quickly and immediately used a hammer to block the crack in the door. The scale in her hand sucked away the source force, showing no more than 2,500, but she said without looking at it, not enough. Both inside and outside were quiet for a moment. She only put away the hammer and closed the door after receiving 2 more sources of power. After calming down for a moment, she seemed as if nothing had happened and was about to move forward. Suddenly, clusters of blue light lit up from various doors, rushing towards the scale in Xia Qimiao's hand. She still walked once, matching the numbers, and breathed a sigh of relief. On the 2nd floor, 1 household paid 2,000 yuan, on the 3rd floor, 10 households paid 15,000 yuan, on the 4th floor, 8 households paid 16,000 yuan, and on the 5th floor, 6 households paid 15,000 yuan. She also robbed 5,000 yuan from 504 yuan, and now the total amount is 53,000 yuan, which is more than 3,000 yuan from the target amount of 50,000 yuan. She can stop moving up. Although the task was only 50,000 yuan, she was worried that the original landlord would use her to confiscate all tenants as an article, so she bravely went up. However, the 6th, 7th, and 8th floors are all empty. Until the last household on the 9th floor. A huge eyeball opened from the wall and stared straight at the unwelcome guest. Xia Qimiao clenched the handle of the hammer and stared back without blinking. That eyeball blinked for a moment, then closed, and the wall returned to its original state. 2 groups of energy drifted into the scale, and without looking, she turned directly into the stairwell, wanting to run down the stairs, but afraid of being detected, she still walked slowly down like when she arrived. Fortunately, she had nothing to do all the way and safely returned to the temporary staff area in the lobby. She pursed her slightly dry lips and reopened the panel. The countdown still has 17.33.50 seconds left, and the rental progress is 63,000/50,000. The 9th floor is grand, giving it more than twice. Although the 2nd task was exceeded, Xia Qimiao dared not relax. With such a long time left, who knows if something unexpected will happen. She held the hammer and kept touching the ground for a moment. Ding! Task updates, please check in a timely manner. Xia Qimiao immediately opened the panel and saw an additional sentence added to the task details. The competition went very smoothly, adhering to the principle of friendship first, competition second. All the building owners engaged in friendly exchanges and decided on the ranking in the first project, allowing the competition to end smoothly ahead of schedule. Building 3 is on its way back. The countdown quickly shortened and reset to 0 in one go. She looked up and saw a skeleton stand in front of her, each bone well maintained and shining with brilliant gold at the junction. At the beginning of the mission, the 3rd building owner slipped 2 S.level props and the temporary worker code to her and teleported them away, but now they teleported back. Sure enough, this dungeon has buried a pit. If she doesn't take action immediately, but rather delays in developing a combat plan, then she may not be able to collect all the rent even if the landlord comes back. How is the rent being collected? There is no vocal cords, but the skull frame can produce a sharp female voice. Put it away. Xia Qimiao placed the scale on the table for her to check. Humph, the skeleton female voice's tone changed again and again, slowly and leisurely speaking, 10 households on the 3rd floor, 9 households on the 4th floor. She stopped, seemingly waiting for Xia Qimiao to ask, but seeing that the other side had no intention of speaking, she couldn't hold her breath and said, "Why don't you ask about the situation on the 2nd floor?" Xia Qimiao thought as expected, there is a problem on the 2nd floor. The skeleton continued, "Did you say you discovered it?" Xia Qimiao replied ambiguously, I charged 2,000 for the second-floor apartment. The skeleton leaned back and said, you actually noticed that useless thing. I temporarily adjusted the floor for it. Counting the number of households just now, she roughly understood the background. This skeleton deliberately allowed the residents on the fourth floor to enter the second floor. If she hadn't robbed, she would have charged 1,000 less. This is the second pit. No wonder the rent on the third and fourth floors was collected so smoothly that there was only a commotion on the fifth floor. I have to thank the landlord for using this as a way to make things mysterious. Forget it, there's no difference between being 3,000 less and 2,000 less. You didn't go up to the ninth floor, so you need your eyes to offset the shortfall. The skeleton tapped the table twice with its finger bones, then slowly picked up the scale. The hollow eyes moved from the numbers on the scale to Xia Qimiao, then from Xia Qimiao to the scale, and then took 2 steps back. Did you still pay the rent on the ninth floor? Xia Qimiao didn't expect to see the words, shock, on the skull's face, so she replied succinctly, the boss is generous and gives more. In fact, there is also a sponsorship of 504, but she omitted it. Okay, your work is over. Let's go, let's go, let's go. The skeleton waved its arms impatiently. After receiving the prompt for the end of the dungeon, Xia Qimiao's eyes turned black. When it lit up, the first thing to enter her view was the bed curtain in the dormitory. At that time, she was greedy for cheap goods and chose the one with a lower price, so the fabric was very thin and couldn't block the light of the light strip. She used to feel dizzy, but now she only feels at ease. She exhaled twice and then took out her black phone from under her pillow. After clicking on it, the screen took 2 clicks and then twisted out the word, summer. Each stroke wriggled like a worm, recombining into a blood-red circle, which was the only app on this phone. In the real world, players cannot summon panels, and this phone is the only channel for communicating reality and gaming. She checked the settlement of this instance, her gaze brushing over the rating of S+, and being stuck by a special line of words. You have obtained the Guelu *1 at number 33 Happy Home. Please enter the Guelu within 24 hours. Failure to do so will result in your own consequences. Player Xia Qimiao's second instance settlement panel name. Temporary building owner's shift task player. Xia Qimiao rating. S+ rewards. Favorite rating of building 3+30, 1000 points of source power, S+ level treasure chest special. You have obtained the number 33 Guelu *1 happiness home. Please enter the Guelu within 24 hours. Failure to do so will result in your own consequences. Evaluation. For the sake of 13,000 yuan of power, I'll give you an extra plus sign. Next time we meet, you can be honest with me. Did you come in through the back door? Happy Home Building 3, end of this chapter. Chapter 3. The Unlucky Lucky Guy with a Severed Head. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The Unlucky Lucky Guy with a Severed Head. It's already late at night, and the pointer has crossed midnight. It's a good time to sleep, but there's not a single person sleeping in the dormitory. This was originally a room of 4, but someone moved out last semester, so there were only 3 people left. The boss doesn't know where he went, he hasn't returned yet. The third person was typing on the keyboard with a clattering sound, and he knew he was on the deadline for homework. The second-ranked Xia Qimiao was picking a cemetery and decisively closed the page after seeing a price of over 100,000 yuan per square meter. In her plan, at this moment when she had just finished her dungeon, she should be ready to go to bed to recover her energy and wake up to deal with Monday's morning rush, instead of going to inexplicable places. It's like just emerging from a wolf's den and falling into a tiger's den. Fortunately, she was given the number 33 of the Guelu instead of the number 3. She has already formed a grudge against 504, and if she goes again, she will definitely not have her own good fruit to eat. Xia Qimiao checked the results this time and found that besides useless things, she still gained quite a lot. The S+ treasure chest also opened up 3,000 points of source power and an S.level skill. Skills. Negotiation, S, description. If your attack value is higher than the opponent's, you can 100% make the monsters obey your commands. If your attack value is lower than the opponent but higher than half of them, then the probability drops to 80%. If your attack value is less than half of the opponent's, then the probability is only 50%. Instructions for use. 1. The object is limited to the remaining rational monsters. 2. It is acceptable to receive bonuses from lucky and probability items, and the effects of similar items cannot be stacked. If used simultaneously, the item with the highest bonus will be automatically selected. 3. Duration of 5 minutes, 1/1 daily frequency, refresh at midnight in real time. If encountering a time chaotic replica, there is no cooldown time or duration, and the source power value is deducted based on the number of times, with 100 points deducted each time. Evaluation. When you are strong enough, there is no need to talk about judgment. At first glance, these rewards may seem small, but in reality, their value is very high. According to posts on the forum, skills are the most scarce, especially those with such strong abilities. This skill represents that no matter how powerful the enemy she encounters in the future, as long as the opponent has reason, she has at least a 50% chance of survival. I suddenly feel like I've come back to life. She flipped over on the bed, and the sound of typing on the keyboard below became lighter and less audible. Xia Qimiao opened another phone and asked it to lean against the wall and record the video directly at her. Players entering and exiting dungeons will only experience 1 second in real time. But she is not sure if the Eerie building is the same, so she needs to keep a record. She is not someone who hesitates because of fear, on the contrary, her mind will be clearer and her decision-making speed will be faster in this situation. She hardly procrastinated and entered Building 33. Xia Qimiao woke up from the intense dizziness. She had a moment of fragments, forgetting who she was and what she wanted to do. However, she quickly regained her composure, and the first scene to enter her sight was an extremely desolate and dilapidated one. She stood in the center space of a cylindrical building, which should be an abandoned building, with only the first and second floors being complete cement formwork. Above it, steel bars were like extinguished candles, standing upright in the hazy white mist. 2 lines of crooked words appeared out of thin air in front of her. Successfully bound, welcome to your arrival, the owner of Jilu, number 33 Happy Home. The Eerie floor panel has been opened, and the gift package has been distributed. Wishing you a happy rental life. Guilu panel, name. Number 33, Happy Home current level. 1 fame. 1 unknown place of origin, total source power. 40-50 points, this source power is not even enough for tenants to fill their teeth, source power consumption. 100 points per day, deducted from 0 in real time, regional unlocking. 1/3 on the first floor, 1/10 on the second floor, there may be some issues, Guilu rule. None tenant. 0 function. Physicalization of Eerie objects other. Second level unlocked store task. 1. Sudden, unintended guest. A mysterious creature with an unknown origin has entered the second floor of your mysterious building. Please dispose of it as soon as possible. 2. Monthly, rent collection business. In order to live the day of lying down and collecting rent as soon as possible, tenants are essential, and at least 3 new tenants must move in each month. Current progress is 0/3. If there are not enough tenants, you will have to replace them yourself. Xia Qimiao's eyes widened wider, and the threat and malice in the last sentence rushed towards her. Isn't this meaning that if she can't complete it, she will become a ghost tenant and pay the rent? And, if she remembers correctly, today is November 27th, which means she needs to recruit 3 tenants within 4 days. I'm dying. Xia Qimiao rolled her eyes in her heart and opened the so-called gift package. She was surprised by the generous amount of this gift package. You should know that the game official is extremely stingy, and compensation emails only distribute 1 point of power. Players usually refer to it as die stingy ghost. And there are 2 states and 4 A-level items in this gift package. The most attractive one for her is A-B-level status. During the duration of the state, the attack power increases by 3000%, rendering any damage from monsters ineffective. Its only flaw is that it lasts for 2 minutes. I feel like I can live again. Xia Qimiao plans to do the first task first, and her current title is Building 33 Master. You are the only owner of this eerie building. You have invaded my territory. She stood there, speaking to the second floor from afar. She needed to first determine whether there was any remaining rationality on the other side before deciding on the next step. A round spherical object suddenly flew down from the second floor. Xia Qimiao immediately turned to the side, but the thing didn't stop and rolled into the wall. Following closely, a headless body rushed down from the second floor. Just as she was about to use the prop, she saw the body in front of her at lightning speed, covering her ears, slippery kneeling. Sister, I didn't know there was a master here, sister. That head swayed and rolled over, seeing Xia Qimiao's gaze like garbage, silently distancing herself. I have no intention of offending you. Your Excellency has a large quantity, please let me go. Although he behaved pitifully, Xia Qimiao wouldn't easily believe him. This is a happy home. Before she could finish speaking, she was interrupted by the sound of surprise on the ground. Ah! This is a happy home. The head sobbed as a familiar blue light emerged from the broken neck. This is all my property, no matter how much it is, this head is my only head. Is today my deadline? No, the day your head fell off was your deadline, you were already dead. Xia Qimiao thought to herself. His fear is not like fraud, it seems that the reputation of happy home is far and wide. You have 2 choices, first, you're scared out of your wits, second, you're renting my house. 2222222, sister, you don't know. I love paying rent the most. I have never owed rent from birth to death. I will pay as much as you say, and I will pay whenever you say. As long as you give me a way out, I promise to pay rent for a lifetime. His words fell like raindrops, afraid that the other side would change their mind a second later. Detected rental intention, contract has been generated. A piece of paper made of unknown leather hangs in front of the head. Sign your real name. For the monster, his real name cannot be disclosed to the public. He hesitated for a moment, but when he saw Xia Qimiao's slightly furrowed brow and the faint aura of the monster king on her body, he immediately stirred the blood in his neck with his hand and quickly signed the name. Xia Qimiao felt nauseous when she saw his movements, but her face remained calm. She took the blue light ball and the contract together, and now there is no such useful scale. She can only judge the value of this ball from the panel, which is 5,000 yuan. Indeed, even a ghost is richer than her. She glanced at her head on the ground and found 3 extra lines of words. C.level, Sun Bucho, 17.year.old, status. Fear, reason. 80, likelihood. 10, no intention to attack, talent. Lucky child, whose trajectory will deviate towards his desired situation, Xia Qimiao is skeptical of this talent. He died at the age of 17 and is now being forcibly bought and sold by her to pay monthly protection fees, rent. Can this also be called lucky? You live on the second floor, with a monthly rent of 1,000 yuan. You can collect it on the first, go away. Ah, good, good. Sun Bucho, as if granted amnesty, rolled his body into a ball and ran along with his head, quickly flashing out of sight. Xia Qimiao. Actually, I didn't mean that. Forget it. She restrained her mind and officially began exploring this eerie building. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Announcement Forum and Flying Bird. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 5. Final Painting, 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Final Painting, 1. Are you the assistants of Detective X? Xia Qimiao opened her eyes and noticed a woman standing in front of her, who looked about 20.7 or 8 years old, dressed in simple clothes, with a slightly haggard but beautiful face. However, none of the four people, including Xia Qimiao, stayed on her face for a few more seconds and coincidentally opened the task panel. Task Name. Final Painting Level. E.Level Details. Painter Lin Jiangdan committed suicide in pursuit of the ultimate art and painted with her own blood, ultimately dying on the canvas. Her assistant suspects that there is a problem with her death and invites Detective X to investigate. However, Detective X has been very busy lately, so he asked his assistant, "Who is you?" to come and collect clues. Requirement. Survive until 22.00 tonight. Punishment for failure. None. Of course there is no punishment when a person dies. Success reward. 100 points of source power, E.Level treasure chest. Oh, the detective is different. Even the assistant is so impolite and doesn't listen to people. The painter's assistant frowned when he saw no response. You guys investigate, I want to see what you can find out. After speaking, she turned around and walked away, but the speed was slightly slower, as if waiting for someone to follow her up, but she was disappointed, and no one stopped her until she left the door. Four people looked at each other, with a balanced gender ratio in the team, consisting of 2 men and 2 women. The level of this mission is not quite right, said the man with glasses among the 4, right. I'm at level C. He threw an olive branch, and another man continued, I'm D.Level. There is also a girl who is very tall, measuring 1.8 meters in height, with neatly cut short hair. She also said confidently, I am C.Level. Xia Qimiao had no intention of not being sociable. Although she is currently lowering the average level of the entire team with her own efforts, she still generously admits, F level. The player upgrade system in There Are No Ghosts in This World is very transparent, and the more times they complete dungeons, the higher their level. The matching mechanism is related to level, not to mention the bug just now. Under normal circumstances, the level of the dungeon and the player's level will only differ by 1 level, so there are indeed 2 C.Level players in the E.Level dungeon that are not quite right. Is this the system not fixed? The glasses man guessed, if that's the case, then it's a bit troublesome. Before he could finish speaking, a 5th person suddenly appeared in the room. He was a boy with headphones hanging around his neck and looked around in confusion. Where is this? His appearance eased the previously tense atmosphere. In one situation, it is normal for players to have chaotic levels in low.level dungeons, which is a dungeon with G.Level newcomers, commonly known as a new manual, which is also the safest type of dungeon in the game. Moreover, this type of dungeon comes with additional rewards. High.level players in the beginner's book will receive, bringing new tasks, and if the new player successfully survives, the old player who receives the task will receive an A.Level treasure chest. The glasses man and tall woman's eyes lit up, as if they were looking at a treasure chest, indicating that they had already received the task. Who explained to him? Let's guess, the man with glasses asked the tall woman. After 2 consecutive defeats, he began to popularize basic knowledge of gaming. Novice dungeons won't die as long as they don't bounce repeatedly in the monster minefield. So the remaining 2 people have no intention of cooperating, so they each go their separate ways to find clues. The task requirements are the clearest, the more clues there are, the more truth can be found, and the higher the completion level, the better the reward. This is consensus. Xia Qimiao walked out of the room and found herself in a villa. The bright sun outside shines brightly, and the bright light enters the corridor through the glass, appearing very warm and harmonious. The interior decoration is also warm-toned. If Xia Qimiao is not sure if this is a replica, she may be deceived by the false appearance. The huge villa is empty, without any servants, and the painter assistant who was just there doesn't know where he went. After understanding the general layout, Xia Qimiao went to the study first. This room had a black and white minimalist style, like a sharpened knife, cold and sharp. The classification of books and newspapers was very clear, and she found the corresponding newspaper with almost no effort. The front page headline was very exaggerated. Surprise! Famous painter Lin Jiangdan was found dead in her own home. Was it a love killing or a hate killing? This journalist's account is not as exaggerated as the title, with a rigorous logic and solid foundation, allowing Xia Qimiao to see a part of the story at that time. Lin Jiangdan's death time was at 22:00 on Monday evening, and she was found dead on the canvas by her assistant. Her last painting is a self-portrait, with a knife in her hand as her paintbrush and blood as her paint. The smiling face of the woman in the painting was cut open from her forehead to her mouth, making anyone who had seen it feel creepy. This is not the most terrifying thing is that the blood in this painting maintains its fresh color and does not oxidize or change due to contact with air. The police found searches in Lin Jiangdan's browsing records a few days ago, such as, how to stay alert when bleeding too much, and there were no signs of a second person present at the scene of death. The forensic examination revealed that she had taken a large amount of painkillers before her death and did not find any signs of trauma. Therefore, this case has been classified as suicide. Her suicide is not surprising, after all, she comes from the famous Lin family. The daughters of the Lin family will all embark on the path of art and eventually die by suicide, and so will she, her aunt, and her ancestors. In the next issue, our reporter will bring you a special topic titled The Cursed Lin Family. Reasoning those Lin painters who have embarked on the path of suicide. Stay tuned. This concludes the article. Xia Qimiao flipped through it and found that there were no newspapers with more updated dates than it. This should be the last issue, so she closed it and took it away. Anything is possible in the dungeon world, and if we move towards a scientific direction, it may be a family-inherited mental illness or something like that. If walking in a strange direction, it may be a sacrificial ceremony or something like that. Xia Qimiao doesn't care about these things. What she thinks is that if Lin Jiangdan becomes a monster and goes crazy, she might also stab herself, making it very suitable to enter her haunted building as a tenant. But to recruit her, first find her. As soon as Xia Qimiao thought of going to find the monster, her legs trembled slightly, but she couldn't see anything on her face, still with a cold and frosty expression. After silently reciting her comforting words that she was not afraid or had nothing to fear, Xia Qimiao walked towards the studio on the 3rd floor. Generally speaking, monsters will appear in their own place of death. She happened to see the man who claimed to be a D-level person coming down the stairs. There was no basic communication between the two of them, but they remained vigilant and brushed past each other. Xia Qimiao walked up to him. She walked towards the room with a work sign, and as she turned the door handle, she suddenly felt a chill coming towards her. Her feet seemed to have stepped on something, and upon closer inspection, it was black, slender hair. New writer, striving for daily updates, seeking collection and recommended tickets. Thank you everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Final Painting, 2. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Final Painting, 2. The interior and exterior spaces of the gatekeeper are divided into two worlds, with warm sunshine outside and deep cold inside, making it difficult to see the specific scene clearly. Xia Qimiao turned on the flashlight, and the bright light gave people enough sense of security. Prop. A-level flashlight description. There is no place it cannot illuminate. It can not only be used for illumination, but also allow you to judge the intensity of surrounding monsters based on the flicker amplitude. The faster the flicker, the faster you need to run. Use source power charging, charge 1 source power, and illuminate for a whole day. If there are no other suitable weapons, you can also throw it out. Comment. When you can't see its radiance, reflect on whether you are blind or not. From an unknown furniture store owner, the lighting of the flashlight is normal, indicating that there are no strange objects around. Xia Qimiao didn't close the door, so she walked in with it open. There is a mannequin leaning down by the door, and what she just stepped on is its hair. Xia Qimiao scanned with a flashlight and didn't notice any abnormalities before starting to explore inside. The studio was huge, and in the middle it seemed to have been cleaned, with many miscellaneous items piled up in the corner. The walls on both sides are adorned with paintings of various styles and themes, mainly featuring warm-toned oil paint and landscape paintings. The wall inside is completely blank, which is very suitable for placing something. It should be about hanging, the last painting, Xia Qimiao guessed, which may be the condition for introducing the supernatural. She walked out of the door and ran into a stranger man head-on. The man dyed his hair colorful and rolled his eyes when he saw Xia Qimiao coming out of the studio. "Are you also a detective assistant? Why are you guys like flies, driving away one after another?" "I am." Xia Qimiao didn't care about his metaphor, "but I am also here to pay tribute to Teacher Lin. I want to give her a truth because her paintings once gave me the strength to live." She ignored the questioning gaze from the other side and continued, "Don't you think Teacher Lin's paintings are very lifelike? They all say that painting is like a person, and I don't believe she would commit suicide if she could make such a painting. If it were pure suicide, there would be no instances. Xia Qimiao doesn't appreciate paintings, but she can do reading comprehension, and art can be explained differently by everyone, without right or wrong." "You are as shallow as those critics," the man chuckled, but his gaze was not as repulsive as before. "I haven't had a chance to ask for advice yet. May I ask who you are?" "You're not very good as a detective assistant, you can't even tell who I am." His mockery was obvious, but he didn't see her face change and felt bored. "I'm her stepson." "Then your relationship must be very good." Xia Qimiao didn't hastily conclude, but because his recent performance was nostalgic for Lin Jiangdan. "What AP, have you ever seen a stepson and stepmother who have a good relationship?" He denied it extremely quickly and even scratched his hair irritably. Xia Qimiao remained non-committal. If it wasn't good, he should have already left instead of still wanting to hear her next analysis. Suddenly, the stepson smiled and his mouth almost grinned into his ear. "Didn't you say you could understand her paintings?" "Xia Qimiao. I never said that." "Very lively, ha ha ha. Then let me show you her last painting." Lin Jiangdan's final painting has been protected, and according to the newspaper, no media has obtained its image. Xia Qimiao thought about whether she had been locked up in this villa, thinking that she needed to search through rooms to find it or wait for it to come out in the dark and windy night to scare people. However, she didn't expect anyone to be willing to take her there directly. "Thank you, please." The stepson suddenly stopped laughing and rolled his eyes at her before leading the way. Two people, one in front and one behind, walked down the winding staircase. "Speaking of which, why haven't you seen your father?" That superstitious idiot, of course, didn't want this villa after this incident and drove everyone away. But he should be back tonight, and tomorrow will be her 7th. I advise you to leave quickly, otherwise you won't have any good fruit to eat if you bump into him. So you came back quite early. Xia Qimiao didn't utter this sentence and quickly summarized it in her heart. Rebellious, not very respectful of her father, suspected of being close to her stepmother. "Is this villa your father's property?" "No, this is marital property." He gritted his teeth as he said those two words. "Built according to her design." Xia Qimiao noticed a conflict, but before she could think it over, the two of them arrived at the place. "Come on, let's go." The stepson lengthened his tone, appearing eerie, but did not attract attention. Xia Qimiao was shocked by the paintings placed in the basement. "It is about 3 meters high, 2 meters long," covered in bloodstains, and vaguely resembles a person's silhouette. The face was painted quite clearly, indicating a smiling woman, but the canvas from forehead to lips was cut open. The lines below become more and more sloppy, while in the middle and lower, there is the blood that has been burnt open on the big beach, with varying shades and blood-colored fingerprints scattered next to it, resembling the last traces of survival. How about it, do you have any insights? The stepson smiled, louder and louder, his voice echoing in the basement, sounding desolate. During that time, she said she wanted to try different styles, draw themes of death, and find inspiration. She committed suicide while searching for it. You said she was just drawing a picture, why did she commit suicide? Do you know? Forensic experts say she cut open her stomach with a knife, then used the blood inside to draw, and eventually lost too much blood and died. Why did she choose to end her life in this way, and why did she have to cut open her stomach and draw with the blood inside? When you said she had passed her painkillers and felt like she was dying. It was so painful and hopeless. The stepson swallowed the latter half of the sentence and looked at the expressionless woman in front of him, feeling like his brain had just twitched. He shouldn't think that she has some ability just because she saw through her emotions at first sight. Maybe it was a blind cat bumping into a dead mouse and guessing recklessly. Uterus. Xia Qimiao spat out 2 words and moved her gaze away from the bloody canvas. She couldn't look anymore, and if she looked back, she would have nightmares. What? The stepson clearly couldn't understand her meaning and was a bit stunned. Didn't you just ask her why she had to cut open her stomach? If Lin Jiangdan wants to complete the theme of death with a near-death experience, she can do it in many ways, such as swiping on her arms and thighs. But she chose this part, which means it has a different meaning. Xia Qimiao explained, when it comes to death, it's hard not to associate it with rebirth. When it comes to the rebirth of a person, it often comes to this, she pointed to her abdomen, the uterus of a woman. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Final Painting, 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Final Painting, 3. There are not only monsters and players in the dungeon, but also a type of existence called NPCs, which are characters that drive the plot or confuse the audience. Not only those who have already died before entering the arena can become monsters, but those who die after the dungeon starts to live may also be. NPC that looks lively may also be disguised as monsters, so no matter who you face, be careful. So far, the flashlight has not flashed, and Xia Qimiao believes that this stepson is NPC. If you ignore his colorful hair, then he still dresses quite humanely. Crazy. The stepson cursed without any direction, unsure if he was evaluating Lin Jiangdan's behavior or not believing Xia Qimiao's association. Do you want to see her again? I don't want it. He firmly refused, as if he had no idea. When he realized what he had refused, the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Hard mouth. Xia Qimiao thought he would want it, otherwise he wouldn't have dressed neatly and come back today. The first 7 is usually a night of remembrance. If you have 1 in 10,000 thoughts, move this painting into her studio. Xia Qimiao originally wanted to move it herself, but gave up when she saw the size of the painting. She was not sure if she could see the monster when she moved the painting over, but it didn't prevent her from drawing a big cake for her stepson. There is no studio, not here. If she hasn't moved the painting yet, she can only wait for the monster to appear before she can. She can't even dig the grave, can she? So when she walked back to the first floor and saw a D-grade man with mud on his pants and shoes, her eyes widened. The tall woman was the first to ask, "Where have you been?" "There is no body in the coffin," said the D-level male in a concise manner. The tall woman took a cold breath and turned around, saying, "You must not learn from him, otherwise you won't know how to die." The headphone man was right next to her, and it seemed like she had made a handover with the glasses man, taking turns leading the newcomers. You should know that this is a beginner's welfare book, so it requires low time and short duration. Don't think that all dungeons will be so simple. If this is a normal level dungeon, the requirement would probably be to uncover the truth about death, which would take about 5 days, and then monsters would appear every night to harm people. So it's best to collect information in the early stages, and don't force yourself in situations where you don't know anything. At the same time, we should be vigilant of our teammates and be careful of those who suddenly come up outside the first instance and treat us well. We bring you because your life is beneficial to us, but others may not necessarily benefit us. Often, there are more than just monsters that harm people. She didn't perfunctory, but sincerely explained the rules to him. The newcomer nodded like pounding garlic, as if remembering. Although D-grade men are used as negative teaching materials for preaching, they have no intention of getting angry and instead give an approving look. Strange person. Who are you? What are you doing at my house? Suddenly, a furious roar spread to everyone's ears. The newcomer and the stepson have 7 or 8 similarities, but they are much more mature than him. Judging from their appearance, this person looks about 10 years older than the stepson. Mr. Deng, we are detectives invited by Miss Lin's assistant to investigate the cause of her death. The tall woman spoke up and answered. In terms of title, she should have some intelligence, but when it comes to assistant, she got stuck and probably hasn't met the woman she started with again. Xia Qimiao pondered in her heart. What is she? You came in without the owner's permission. This is a private intrusion into the house. Don't leave now. Do you insist on us reporting it to the police? Mr. Deng was accompanied by a charming woman in a red dress, who was driving people away in a commanding manner. To be honest, she was quite pleasing to the eye. However, Xia Qimiao had just appreciated a painting that was completely bloodstained, and it was precisely when she couldn't see the red color. Now, being hit by such a fierce color, her stomach was churning. Nausea. She retched briefly, instantly attracting the attention of everyone present, and the woman's face turned red with anger. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling well. Although she was so embarrassed that she wanted to pick the floor, her face was calm and she pretended as if nothing had happened, which made the people watching her uncomfortable. Sasha, take this lady to the restroom. Mr. Deng averted his gaze and said to the woman in the red dress next to him. No need to trouble, I know the way and can go there by myself. Thank you. Xia Qimiao turned around against Sasha's gaze as she tried to devour her alive. When she left, she heard Mr. Deng ask if he had found anything, but as she walked away, she couldn't hear anything. She saw a figure leaning against the wall at the corner, with colorful hair that was very eye-catching. He was smiling, as if happy to see a good show. I thought you were lying to me when you said you liked her, but it wasn't until I saw your attitude towards the secretary that I realized it was true. Xia Qimiao. I have never said that I like Lin Jiangdan. What kind of thing does that woman think she is? She's so arrogant, she really thinks she's the old man's legitimate wife. By the way, how could this old man come back so early, even before the sun sets? Although his stepson called him that, based on conscience, Mr. Deng appeared to be in his 30s at most, far from reaching the level of old. However, thanks to his blessings, Xia Qimiao understood his family relationship. His father married Lin Jiangdan as a continuation but cheated on his secretary, and his son liked this stepmother but did not admit it. So, what role does another person play in it? Have you moved the painting over yet? I came to talk to you about this matter. When I moved that painting, it disappeared. Xia Qimiao listened to his calm tone, as if talking about something as ordinary as a bird flying away, and then probed, don't you feel shocked? It's better for someone to shock me when they say they can see her again, as long as they can see her. He stopped, unsure of what he would do when he saw her. Xia Qimiao also stopped because she had arrived at the studio. She closed the studio before leaving, but at this moment the door was half closed, casting a slender shadow under the setting sun. The sound of fabric rubbing against the ground came from the room. The stepson opened the door first and entered, fanning out a strong smell of blood. Xia Qimiao turned on her flashlight again and it flickered at low frequencies. She was mentally prepared before entering, and saw a disheveled female humanoid creature half kneeling, still groping on the ground. As it moved, a large number of bloodstains dragged out from the ground. Suddenly, a drop of liquid fell into the pool of red, splashing with water. Xia Qimiao lifted her flashlight and looked at the source, facing a pair of red eyes, staring straight down. The light of the flashlight swept across the entire ceiling, revealing that it was occupied by a huge canvas. The figures on it were no longer wearing smiling faces, but rather ferocious and twisted faces. The blood and tears flowing from its eyes fell onto its head, but it was completely unaware. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Final Painting, 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 Final Painting, 4, Dida, Dida. My painting, my painting. I feel it, I feel it. The monster dragged its legs and groped, its abdominal cavity wide open, and the things flowing out of it made Xia Qimiao unable to bear to look. Although my stepson had just entered, now there is only her and the monster left in the room. The monster changed direction and was about to touch her. Xia Qimiao felt a chill from her coccyx attacking her heart. Your painting is on top of your head. Upon hearing the sound, the monster paused and lifted its head, revealing a pale face amidst its hair. The original position of its eyes was only 2 empty spaces. Between lightning and flint, Xia Qimiao came to his senses. Neither the newspaper or the stepson mentioned that Lin Jiangdan dug her eyes before her death, indicating that her eyes were normal when her body was first discovered. Someone dug out her eyes after her death, afraid of being exposed and stealing her body, so the coffin was empty. I can't see, can't see, can't see, can't see, what about my paintings? If this monster can respond correctly to her words, it indicates that it understands human language, which means that there is residual rationality. Be my tenant. Skill. Negotiation, S, failed to use. Guelu follows the principle of voluntariness, and only when the other party is willing will a contract appear. You cannot use game skills or props to force it. Upon seeing the system prompt, Xia Qimiao pursed her tongue and looked down at the eerie object she was looking for, then changed her face. Let me introduce myself. I am the owner of the Eerie building at number 33 Happiness Home, she said with a friendly smile and a soft voice. The service purpose of Happiness Home is to make every resident feel happy and joyful. If you are willing to become my tenant, then I am willing to work hard for you and find your painting. Draw, draw. It suddenly lifted its head again, its hollow eyes facing Xia Qimiao, making her hair stand on end. However, the smile on her face did not change, and even the curvature of her mouth did not decrease. Yes, as long as you're willing, her tone was very determined, as if as long as it agreed, she could immediately bring the painting to its eyes. The contract appears out of thin air. It felt like it had a feeling in its heart, lifting its hand covered in blood and waving it, signing successfully, and 3 lines of words appeared on its head. C.Level, Lin Jiangdan, 32 years old, status. Mad, reason. 40, declining, likelihood. 20, fluctuating violently, no intention to attack, unstable, talent. Pure, she is a white canvas that won't be dyed with other people's colors, there seems to be another useless talent. Have a pleasant transaction. You are staying in 202 and the rent is 1,000 yuan per month. It will be charged on the 1st. Please prepare in advance. Xia Qimiao looked at the attack intention and knew she needed to act quickly, otherwise nothing would become something. This villa is designed specifically for painters, so the space in the studio is exceptionally large, with a high ceiling. The idea of climbing up and removing the paintings is not very practical. She took out a hook the size of a palm and threw it fiercely towards the ceiling. Prop. A.Level fishing line hook. Description. When it is thrown out, there is an 80% chance that it will catch something in your sight, but whether it can be pulled back depends on your own abilities. Comment. Never Air Force. From a well-known phishing scammer surnamed T, the fishing line is said to be a thread, but in reality it is a rope that is the thickness of a thumb. Xia Qimiao is not worried that it will cut herself if it is too thin, so she wraps it around her arm and forcefully pulls it down, but the painting remains motionless. Your attack value is insufficient, please keep working hard. As a last resort, Xia Qimiao could only look directly at the eerie figure in the painting. Suddenly, she felt an itch in her left ear and used her empty left hand to touch it, but instead of touching her ear, she touched a cold hand. In an instant, she remembered 504 and the strange object with hands all over it. Talent. Cowardly Ghost takes effect, and your attack value is rapidly increasing. With a loud bang, the painting was torn to the ground, and blood splattered all over Xia Qimiao's lower body. Immediately, a figure shot out from behind her and lay directly on the painting. Lin Jiangdan had just walked around behind her at some point, and her hand was also hers. Xia Qimiao didn't care about these things and quickly touched both sides of her ears. They were still there, not her hands. She just breathed a sigh of relief. Lin Jiangdan's current state has become troubled, her rationality has increased to 60, her favorability has increased to 40, and the instability behind her attack intention has also disappeared. She no longer repeated those few words like a cassette player, and her voice became much clearer. Master, I can't see. Can you help me? How can I help you by cutting out my eyes? Xia Qimiao was startled by her own thoughts. She was afraid that Lin Jiangdan would also think the same way, so she quickly brainstormed and thought of a solution. Ask her who took her eyes. No, she was already dead at that time, probably not clear. Can you feel where your eyes are? It's right in my eye sockets. It's strange. It's right here, but I can't see anything. No, your eyes are empty. Wait. Xia Qimiao's spiritual light flashed as she looked at the painting. Although the side with the portrait had fallen towards the floor, it was still facing upwards at this moment. The portrait was facing Lin Jiangdan, with a silhouette very similar to hers. Can you touch the long cut on the painting that was cut by the knife? Put your hand in, she commanded Lin Jiangdan. She couldn't do it herself, she wouldn't do it even if she died. Ah, my eyes. As expected, Lin Jiangdan touched two round things. Xia Qimiao immediately averted her gaze and pondered the reason why the killer had hidden his eyes here. Yes, the killer, it's clear that someone was behind the scenes behind all this. That's really bad. Lin Jiangdan stood up after finishing her eyes. She pulled her long hair behind her head, revealing her face. If you ignore the blood stains on her face, it looks like a normal person at first glance. What? My last painting is really poor. As her words fell, the studio lit up. I don't know who opened the curtains, but the night outside is already deep. The ceiling was originally equipped with lights, and now warm yellow lights are being cast. Ah, you finally opened your eyes. You kept muttering and dancing with your eyes closed, it didn't work for so long. The stepson sneered, and his smile froze as his gaze shifted behind Xia Qimiao. Lin. He stuttered and couldn't even call him by name. When he saw the person covered in blood, he instinctively took a step back. Good evening, Mr. Xiao Deng. Lin Jiangdan was more generous than him, and when she lowered her head to cover up her awkward posture, she was covered in a coat. She looked up and saw the landlord smiling at her. Xia Qimiao, who had long wanted to do this, expressed that she was in a good mood. If she couldn't see it, there would be no blood. Good evening, the stepson finally spoke normally. Are you coming back for revenge? I will help you. Who killed you? I think I committed suicide, Lin Jiangdan threw a thunderous sound, and she paused. It's not entirely true, after all, a person who commits suicide cannot become a monster after death. Oh no, this part is not something that Mr. Deng can know. I wish you a good sleep in the future. She reached out to her stepson and nodded, and he immediately disappeared into the room. Xia Qimiao's pupils earthquake. What did she just see? The boss of the dungeon instantly killed the NPC. At the same time, someone opened their eyes in bed and said, "What did I dream of? I can't remember." End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Final Painting, v. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Final Painting, v. Time has not left any obvious marks on Lin Jiangdan's face, and she looks only in her 20s at her 30s. You just said it's not completely considered suicide, what's going on? Normally, when entering a dungeon, players need to collect information, reason while saving their lives, solve puzzles, find the truth, and solve the obsession with monsters. But Xia Qimiao found a shortcut and directly asked the deceased himself. I wanted to immerse myself in the painting with a dying experience, so the fatal injury was caused by myself. However, I didn't really want to die either. I discussed with my assistant and asked her to bring someone to save me at the last moment, but she didn't come. It was foolish to do something useless and trust the wrong person. She spoke lightly, as if she was not cursing herself. But I didn't die without any value. Isn't that what attracted you, Lord? She crossed her hands and lifted them to her chest, as if a believer were praying to her deity. You are the most beautiful and powerful of all the Eerie kings I have ever seen. May I draw a picture for you? There's no need, this is just one of my skin bags. Xia Qimiao's lie came out of her mouth. She didn't want to see herself appear on the canvas bloody too. Have you seen many strange kings? Yes, when I first became a monster, they asked me to go and paint, but most of them only dared to shrink in their own place, and there was no one like you who could maintain an impeccable human form in their Eerie realm for a long time. Xia Qimiao. Is there a possibility that I am already human? She raised her eyebrows and asked, just this. Of course not, the illustrious reputation of Happy Home. Even a mysterious creature like me, who knows nothing about the world, has heard of it. I never expected that a weak creature like me would have the opportunity to move in. Thank you, Lord. And although you suppressed your breath very well, I can still sense a bit of terrifying pressure that belongs to the Demon King far above me. Lin Jiangdan hesitated for a moment before finally telling the truth. She felt that this was a test of her by the landlord. As expected, she couldn't feel any eerie aura in the next second. This shows that the landlord could have suppressed her perfectly, but only to test her. She should have passed. She consciously performed well and then praised, I can't feel it at all now, you're really powerful. Xia Qimiao, who had just sealed the state King of the Strange King, into the warehouse, was unaware of the twists and turns in Lin Jiangdan's heart. She breathed a sigh of relief as she found the source. Last week, which was also her second day in the game, Fanio posted an emergency post, where members of the organization encountered a situation where a monster disguised as a player in an S.level dungeon. At the beginning of the game, there were 10 people, but in the end, only he managed to escape. This post sparked heated discussions, with most players stating that if they discover that their teammates may be monsters, they would rather kill them by mistake than let them go. She doesn't want to be the one who was wrongly killed, she needs to be careful. What are you going to do next, revenge? No need, she will find death on her own. Lin Jiangdan looked down at the ground with a deep gaze, then turned back. And I have already been reborn. If you allow me, then I want to go back to my new home now. I also want to move this painting back as a warning. Lin Jiangdan nodded at the painting under her feet. But don't worry, I won't leave such an ugly work outside and embarrass you. Xia Qimiao nodded, the monster and the painting disappeared together, and there was not even a trace of blood on the ground, as if nothing had happened. She let out a long sigh, withdrew the hook from the prop rack, and continued holding the flashlight. Although she has obtained the reference answer through a card bug, the proof process still requires her own reasoning. She needs to investigate the motives behind her assistant's harm, otherwise it is estimated that the rating will be the same as hers, only F. Perhaps stimulating the killer to make her self-destruct is also a way, but Xia Qimiao has never encountered the assistant she started with again. She found a student development diary in the middle of Lin Jiangdan's bedroom bookshelf. She treated her assistant as a student guide, but the result was not satisfactory. There is a leave letter inside, and the assistant took 2 months off with an end date of today. How come there is still an alibi, forged? Xia Qimiao focused on the last few pages. Xiao Wei returned early, it seems she's not in a good mood. Let her rest for a few days. Why haven't we been able to find her all along, and everyone at home says they haven't seen her? I found her, it turned out she was staying in the basement. The record came to an abrupt end, with the last day being 7 days before Lin Jiangdan's death. There is still 1 hour left until the end of the dungeon. Because it is not an adversarial dungeon, there is no conflict of interest between everyone, so Xia Qimiao successfully convinced the other 2 teammates to exchange intelligence. She erased the communication with the monster and provided information about her stepson and the diary. The man with glasses ruled out Mr. Zheng's suspicion. He and the deceased only had a nominal marriage without any actual marriage, and it was a family alliance without personal emotional entanglement. The 2 have always lived separately. The tall woman said that her secretary Sasha was confused. She wore a red dress because the deceased had previously said she didn't want to see only people in black and white in front of the grave. Their relationship was actually very good. Sasha said that the assistant was jealous of the painter and believed that everything about the painter came from money and status. Beginners are already simple. With fewer people, even elimination methods can deduce who the culprit is. The glasses man put away his information. Moreover, there hasn't been any strange object yet. I thought it would hinder us from finding clues. Everyone didn't know that the object they were longing for was being chained through their shoulders and nailed to the basement wall. On the wall, you can still see the frame marks left by the movement of the painting, while the eerie object is hung in the center, coinciding with the position of the original portrait. Why did you first come to me? Do I look so weak? D.Level male, no, the man codenamed Red Falcon looked at the struggling evil monster. To be honest, I haven't started to doubt you yet. I don't have the ability of a phoenix. She can tell who a monster is at a glance, but I can't. The Red Falcon glanced at his watch, dragged the chair to dust it off, and sat down. I'm a gamist, I just want to get the most rewards, and there's still time. Maybe we can talk about it, he said, seeing the monster. He didn't respond and only focused on struggling. A blue light appeared between his fingers, and the monster struggled even harder, roaring at the Red Falcon. I don't know if I can reimburse the boss when I go back. He waved his finger and the source power flew towards the monster and penetrated its body. He saw that there was no change, so he threw a few more balls until it regained its rough humanoid shape before stopping. Talk about it. Guewu's laughter was sharp and he said, you don't even know that the Gue Wang is among you. Why don't you talk about it? Wait until you die. Xia Qimiao sneezed. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Final Painting, 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors.